The Hall of Infinite Verdicts was a monument to the galaxy's vanity. Its walls, forged from the molten cores of conquered worlds, shimmered with the iridescent sheen of 1,000 legal precedents, each one a death sentence for some lesser species that had dared to dream beyond its station. The air hummed with the low-frequency resonance of the High Justice's thoughts, a sound like distant thunder rolling over a battlefield of broken civilizations. At the center of it all, beneath the vaulted ceiling where holographic constellations shifted to mirror the court's whims, stood Elias Vexley, human, unarmed, outnumbered. The High Justices loomed above him on their floating daises, their forms a grotesque tapestry of evolutionary hubris. There was Xerix the Unblinking, a serpentine mass of translucent flesh threaded with veins of liquid mercury, his 12 eyes never closing, never wavering. Beside him perched High Justice Valus, a being of fractal geometry, her body folding and refolding like an origami nightmare, each crease a law etched into her very being. And then there was Korthal, a hulking obsidian monolith whose voice emerged from the cracks in his body, slow and grinding, like continents colliding. They had summoned Elias here under the pretense of dialogue, a laughable notion. The invitation had been etched on a slab of neutron star alloy, delivered by a drone that vaporized itself afterward, because even their mail was a flex. "Ambassador Vexley," Xerix hissed, his voice slithering through the chamber. "You stand before the Galactic High Court as representative of a species that has, by all metrics, failed to meet the standards of enlightened existence." Elias kept his hands clasped behind his back, fingers interlaced to hide the tremor of anticipation. He had spent years preparing for this moment, not as a diplomat, but as a player stepping onto a board where the pieces were civilizations and the rules were written in blood. "Failed?" Elias repeated, tilting his head with deliberate innocence. "By whose metrics?" The gallery of assembled alien observers, ambassadors, scholars, and sycophants from 100 species rippled with discomfort. No one interrupted the High Justices. No one questioned. Valus unfolded a new limb, the motion sending a cascade of light across her body as she consulted some internal ledger. "Your history is one of ceaseless conflict. Your planet groans under the weight of your exploitation. Your emotional volatility is a threat to galactic stability." She paused, as if savoring the next words. "By every metric but your own." It was a small thing, barely a twitch of his lips, but it was the first move in a game they didn't realize they were playing. "With all due respect, justices, if my people are so beneath you, why bother with a trial? Why not just erase us?" Korthal's obsidian form shuddered, cracks spreading like fault lines. "Justice," he boomed, "is not destruction. It is education. You will learn, or you will be removed." Ah, there it was, the trap laid bare. They wanted humanity to kneel, to admit its inferiority, to beg for mercy. That would make their eventual subjugation so much cleaner, so much more legal. Elias let his gaze drift across the court, taking in the towering arches, the hovering drones recording every moment, the smug certainty in the justices' postures. They had done this before, to the Cathari, to the Drexili, to every species that had dared to rise too fast, too loud. "I accept your invitation to trial," Elias said, bowing just deep enough to be polite without conceding an inch. "But I do so under one condition." Xerix's mercury veins pulsed. "You are in no position to make demands." "Not a demand," Elias corrected. "A request. Let the proceedings follow the Lex Universalis, your own sacred legal code." A murmur swept through the gallery. The Lex Universalis was a labyrinth of contradictions, a text so dense even the High Justices needed AI augments to parse it. No outsider had ever mastered it. Veli's fractal edges twitched in what might have been amusement. "You believe you can navigate our laws? I believe in fairness, Elias said, lying through his teeth. And what could be fairer than judging us by your own standards? The justices exchanged glances. They thought it was a concession, a surrender. They were wrong. Very well, Xerxes said at last. Let the record show the human has chosen his own shackles. Elias bowed again, lower this time, hiding the glint in his eyes. Checkmate in 30 moves. The Hall of Infinite Verdicts was a masterpiece of alien architecture, soaring crystalline arches that refracted light into prismatic judgments, walls embedded with the fossilized remains of civilizations deemed unworthy, and a floor so polished it mirrored the faces of the condemned. Elias Vexley stood at its center, a lone human in a chamber built to humble entire species. The high justices loomed above him on their floating daises, their forms shifting between dimensions as if to remind him of their incomprehensible superiority. Xerxes, the eldest of the justices, unfurled a holographic scroll with a flick of his tri-jointed fingers. The projection spilled across the chamber, a damning tapestry of human history, wars, environmental collapse, riots, and every brutal conflict ever recorded. Behold, Xerxes intoned, his voice a harmonic resonance that vibrated in Elias' bones. The legacy of your kind, a trail of chaos written in blood and ash. Elias didn't flinch. He had expected this. You misunderstand, he said, tilting his head as if considering a curious puzzle. What you call chaos, we call growth. Every fracture in our history was a step toward something greater. A ripple of disdain passed through the justices. The V30 representative, a being of liquid mercury and razor-sharp intellect, pulsed with amusement. Growth? Your species clings to its primitive emotions like a drowning creature to wreckage. You are unstable, unpredictable. And yet, Elias countered, here I stand, in your court, your invitation. Xerxes' ocular membranes narrowed. A courtesy, one we shall now revoke unless you prove yourselves worthy of continued existence. The chamber darkened. A new projection materialized, a series of tests, each more impossible than the last. A cultural evaluation requiring mastery of 1,000 galactic dialects. An intellectual gauntlet of quantum ethics, puzzles no organic mind could solve. And finally, a war simulation against an unbeatable AI general. Submit to these trials, Xerxes declared, and should you pass, though you will not, humanity may yet earn the privilege of servitude under our guidance. Elias exhaled slowly. He had known they would do this, rig the game, stack the deck, but they had made one mistake. They had let him choose the rules. I accept, he said, bowing slightly, but under one condition. The justices exchanged glances. The Keith Moran judge, a towering figure of jagged crystal, emitted a subsonic chuckle. You dare impose terms? Not impose, Elias corrected. Request that every test be administered according to the letter of your own legal code. The Galactic Legal Codex was a labyrinth, a trillion-page monstrosity of contradictions and loopholes, amended over millennia by 1,000 species. No outsider had ever mastered it. Xerxes' tendrils twitched. You presume to navigate our laws? I presume nothing, Elias said, spreading his hands. But if your justice is as flawless as you claim, then surely your system can withstand scrutiny. A murmur ran through the assembled observers, lesser diplomats, scholars, and emissaries from across the galaxy. No one had ever challenged the court like this. The V30 representative leaned forward, its mercury surface rippling with intrigue. Let him try. It will be amusing. Xerxes hesitated, then nodded. So be it. The human has chosen his path. Let the record reflect his audacity. Elias suppressed a smile. Audacity. They thought this was arrogance. They didn't realize it was the first move in a game they had already lost. The first test began. A cultural evaluation. The hologram shifted, displaying a complex alien ritual. A dance of light and sound meant to convey the unity of the cosmos. Elias had 30 seconds to replicate it. The justices watched, already savoring his failure. Elias closed his eyes. He didn't need to memorize the dance. He needed to find the loophole. And there it was. Article 47, subsection 9 of the Codex, he recited, eyes snapping open. No being may be judged unfit for failure to perform a ritual outside their biological capacity. My species lacks photophores. I cannot produce bioluminescence. Therefore, this test is invalid under your own laws. A stunned pause. The Kaith Moran judge's crystalline body emitted a sharp crack. He cites the Codex. Xerx's tendrils coiled tight. Proceed to the next trial. The intellectual gauntlet materialized, a shifting maze of ethical paradoxes. Elias was given a scenario. A starship's AI must choose between saving its crew or a planet of innocence. A classic no-win scenario. Your answer, the V-Thury demanded. Elias didn't hesitate. I invoke Precedent A892 Alpha, the Vextharan Compromise. The AI has no legal authority to make such a choice. The decision defaults to the highest-ranking organic being present. Xerx's voice turned brittle. You have studied. I have, Elias agreed. And now I ask, by what right do you judge us for our unstable nature when your own legal history is built on genocide? The chamber erupted. The gallery of observers hissed and clicked in shock. The justices' forms flickered, their dimensional stability wavering for the first time in centuries. You overstep, human, Xerx snarled. No, Elias said softly. I play by your rules. The final test loomed. The war simulation. The hologram reshaped itself into a star field, fleets materializing on either side. The AI general, an entity of pure logic, awaited his first move. Elias cracked his knuckles. Checkmate in 29. The Hall of Infinite Verdicts had never known silence like this. Elias Vexley stood at the center of the chamber, the polished floor reflecting the shifting hues of the galactic aurora above. The high justices loomed over him from their elevated dais, their many-limbed forms silhouetted against the iridescent glow of the chamber's bioluminescent walls. Their arrogance had been palpable moments ago, their verdict already etched into the cosmic record. Now, for the first time in centuries, their certainty wavered. Elias had just quoted their sacred legal code back to them. Adaptive intelligence, he repeated, his voice calm but carrying, as defined in the third precedent of the Xixian Concord, grants provisional rights to any species capable of demonstrating strategic innovation under duress. Heart. He tilted his head, the ghost of a smirk playing at his lips. Unless the esteemed justices now wish to argue their own archives are unreliable. Justice Xerx, a towering being with chitinous plates that clicked when agitated, stiffened. The human twists words, he hissed. No, Elias corrected. I read them. Aloud, in your own language. He tapped the holographic display floating before him, where the relevant passage pulsed in the court's angular script. Unless the translation is flawed, a murmur rippled through the gallery, a sea of alien observers, diplomats, and emissaries from 100 species. The Kaith Moran's crystalline carapaces shimmered in unease, the V-Thurus tentacles coiled tighter. No one had ever dared weaponize the court's own laws against them. Justice Core, the eldest and most serpentine of the tribunal, leaned forward. You cite precedents from eras of lesser enlightenment, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. The standards for civilization have evolved. Elias didn't blink. Define civilization, then. The chamber stilled. Core's slit pupils narrowed. You mock this court? I ask a question, Elias said. One your legal code requires you to answer if challenged under Article 7. He spread his hands. Or is the Galactic High Court exempt from its own transparency statutes? The gallery erupted. A Nixandra delegates multiple heads whipped toward each other, hissing in shock. The AI scribes hovering at the periphery of the room flickered, recalibrating their records in real time. Xerix's claws unsheathed, scraping against the dais. Civilization, he spat, is order. It is the eradication of chaos. It is the supremacy of reason over primitive instinct. Elias nodded slowly. Ah, so when the Xixian hegemony purged the Tvix clusters for disrupting galactic harmony, was that order or instinct? A holographic projection flared to life above him, displaying records the court had sealed millennia ago. Star systems glassed, species erased from history, all under the justice's ancestral regimes. The images were grainy, censored, but undeniable. Core's frills flared crimson. Those were necessary sacrifices. Funny, Elias mused. That's what we humans call our barbaric history, too. He turned to the gallery, his voice sharpening. The only difference? We admit it. The chamber trembled, not physically, but in the way a predator's den trembles when the prey turns and bares its teeth. The justices exchanged glances. Their confidence had been a fortress. Elias had just pointed out the cracks in its foundation. Enough, Xerix roared. The human seeks to distract from his species' failings. We proceed to the next test. A holographic battlefield materialized between them, a starfield dotted with fleets, a war simulation designed to crush Elias with sheer tactical superiority. The AI adjudicator's voice boomed, combat parameters set, victory conditions, annihilation or surrender. Elias studied the board. The court's fleet outnumbered his 10-1. Their ships were faster, their weapons more advanced. The justices leaned back, their earlier unease replaced with smug anticipation. Then Elias did something unexpected. He laughed. You're using the Battle of Cerberon as your template? He shook his head. That's a human engagement from our first Mars rebellion. The AI flickered. Template source. Classified. Classified? Elias arched a brow. Or stolen? He tapped a command into his wrist display. The simulation shimmered and new labels appeared over the fleets. Human ship designs. Earth's colonial insignias. You repurposed our own history to test us. How? Unoriginal, the gallery gasped. The justices stiffened. D-just. Elias moved his first piece, a feigned retreat, luring the AI's vanguard into an asteroid field. You want to see adaptive intelligence? He said softly. Let's play. The chamber held its breath. Checkmate in 29. The holographic battlefield shimmered into existence above the tribunal's central dais, a sprawling starscape of tactical grids and flickering warships. The high justices leaned forward in their thrones, their many-limbed forms casting jagged shadows. This was their domain. War games honed over millennia, simulations where logic and firepower always triumphed. Elias Vexley stood motionless, his hands clasped behind his back. The projection's blue glow etched hollows beneath his eyes. Observe, Ambassador, rumbled Justice Core, its voice like tectonic plates grinding. The purity of strategy unclouded by primitive instinct. Your species' fate hinges on this. Elias smiled. Funny, I was about to say the same to you. The AI adjudicator's voice chimed, sterile and omnipresent. Simulation parameters set. Engagement commences in 5, 4, 3. The justice's fleet surged forward in perfect formation, a diamond-edged spear of destroyers. Why? Elias' ragtag human flotilla scattered like startled birds, too scattered. Pathetic, hissed Justice, unpredictable, its bioluminescent frill flaring. They break before the first volley. But Elias' fingers danced across his holopad. The fleeing ships weren't fleeing, they were hurting. A cluster of the Justice's vanguard ships pursued a lone human frigate into an asteroid belt, only for the rocks to detonate in synchronized bursts, mining charges. The shockwave crippled 3 cruisers. Article 14.3 of your Martial Codex, Elias said mildly. Environmental reappropriation constitutes valid tactical deployment. The gallery of alien observers erupted in hushed chatter. Justice, besides eye stalks, twitched. A fluke. Proceed. Elias let the Justices take his outer colonies. Let them believe they were winning. Then, as their fleets consolidated over a gas giant's moon, he detonated the entire settlement. The explosion wasn't nuclear, it was atmospheric, igniting the planet's hydrogen reserves into a temporary sun. Half their armada vanished in the inferno. You burned your own people, sputtered Adaptive, its carapace vibrating. Elias met its gaze. No, I burned yours. The hologram zoomed in. The colony had been a drone facade. You never scanned for life signs. You assumed. Silence! Coarse fists slammed down, cracking the dais. Elias' next play was slower. Deliberate. He began replicating the Justice's own formations, but lagging by precisely 6 seconds. He's mocking us, Unpredictable snarled. No, Elias corrected. Learning. With each mirrored maneuver, the AI's predictive algorithms grew more entangled. The Justice's responses grew sluggish, their certainty fraying. Then, Elias broke the pattern. His ships split into 3 fractal strikes, each attacking a different logistical node. The Justice's fleet stuttered, caught between countermeasures. You're hesitating, Elias murmured. Why? You know these moves. After all, he tapped his pad. The simulation froze, then rewound to a centuries-old battle from Earth's Third World War. The same formations, the same outcome. The chamber went deathly still. You repurposed our history to test us, Elias said. How unoriginal. The hologram flickered, replaced by archival footage, the High Court's fleets glassing the Caith Moran homeworld. The real battle this simulation was based on. Alien delegates surged to their feet, their translators spitting static. Justice Corps' massive form trembled, not with rage, but with something far worse. Elias moved his final piece, a single frigate, slipping past their defenses to hover at the heart of their virtual capital. Checkmate, he said. The AI's verdict was inevitable. Victory, human sovereignty. Margin 99.8%. For the first time in galactic history, the High Court had no words, and the galaxy was watching. The holographic battlefield flickered and died, leaving the Hall of Infinite Verdicts in stunned silence. The air, thick with the ozone scent of dying projections, crackled with something far more dangerous, doubt. The High Justices, unpredictable, their 4 eyes twitching in erratic unison, beside, their carapace plates clacking like unsettled armor, and Core, their voice modulator emitting a low, staticky growl, leaned forward in their towering perches. You stole that simulation, Elias said, his voice soft, almost conversational. Not just the framework, the battle, the history. Ooh. You repackaged our tactics as your own test. The gallery erupted. Alien delegates, Caith Moran with their crystalline limbs flashing agitation, Vithuri tentacles lashing, whispered in a dozen languages. The High Justice's holographic emitters flickered, their pristine images glitching for the first time in living memory. Elias smiled. Not the sharp, predatory grin of a victor, but the quiet, weary curve of a man stepping onto a path he had long known was inevitable. "No," he said, "you don't." He lifted a hand. Data streams, dates, species designation X447, wiped from the archives after developing faster than light travel. A gasp from the gallery. Species designation L992, reclassified as non-sentient when their philosophers questioned your authority. Another, the Crystalline Accords, your laws, state that any species demonstrating adaptive intelligence must be granted autonomy. Yet here we are, coarse voice modulator screeched. "You dare accuse this court of—" "I don't accuse." Elias tapped the podium once more. The central screen split, displaying two images side by side, the High Court's emblem and a human chessboard. "I demonstrate. You invited me here to play a rigged game, but you forgot one rule." He leaned forward. "Every gambit has a counter." The chamber's ambient light dimmed. Elias' next words fell like stones into still water. "This trial was never about humanity's flaws. It was about your fear." He gestured to the screens. "You erase what you can't control. You call it justice. But it's just panic." Unpredictable's limbs spasmed. "Silence him." Elias didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every syllable carried, amplified by the chamber's acoustics and the galaxy's live feeds. "You built this court to last forever, but forever's a long time to hide the truth." He paused. "So let me ask, what happens when the galaxy realizes you're not guardians?" A murmur, then a roar. The Caithmaran delegates rose first, their crystalline bodies refracting light like shattering glass. The Vithuri followed, tentacles coiled in outrage. One by one, species the court had evaluated, reclassified, or silenced turned their backs on the high justices. Coarse voice modulator failed entirely, their words dissolving into static. Besides, carapace plates locked shut with a sound like a vault ceiling. Elias watched them, not with triumph, with pity. "You wanted to judge humanity?" He spread his hands. "Now you have." The chamber doors burst open. Not by force, by choice. Allied ambassadors, their faces alight with something the court had never seen in them before. Defiance. The High Justice's holograms flickered again. This time, they didn't recover. And Elias Vexley, chess master of Earth, turned and walked away, leaving the Galactic High Court to crumble behind him. Dialogue. Elias' quiet, surgical precision contrasts with the justice's escalating desperation. ODG, every gambit has a counter. Versus coarse, static-filled shrieks. Action. Physical details, unpredictables, twitching eyes. Besides locking carapace, mirror their psychological unraveling. Pacing, short, punchy sentences during the reveal. "You stole. You erase. You panic." Heightened tension, continuity, direct callback to Section 4's War Game twist, Battle of Series, and Section 2's legal loopholes, Crystalline Accords, emotional payoff. The gallery's rebellion mirrors the example stories, dismantled without lifting a finger. Vibe, but with legal strategic flair. Transition hook. For Section 6, the crumbling court's holograms flicker, literally and symbolically, as Elias exits, setting up the aftermath's galactic power vacuum. The Hall of Infinite Verdicts had never known silence like this. The crystalline walls, once thrumming with the self-assured hum of the High Justice's authority, now absorbed only the hollow echo of Elias Vexley's footsteps as he strode toward the exit. Behind him, the holographic emblems of the court flickered erratically, symbols of a power structure unraveling in real time. The gallery, packed with alien dignitaries and observers, had erupted into chaos moments ago. Now, it was eerily still, as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. He didn't need to. He could feel the weight of the justice's stares, Unpredictable's four eyes burning with impotent fury. Besides segmented limbs twitching in agitation, coarse, usually immaculate bioluminescent frills dulled with shock. They had summoned a human to break, and instead, he had shattered them. The news feeds exploded before Elias' ship even left the tribunal's orbital platform. Footage of the trial, of the human ambassador dissecting the High Court's hypocrisy with surgical precision, of the war game gambit that exposed their stolen strategies, of the damning evidence of their systemic purges, rippled across every civilized system. Species who had spent centuries under the justice's condescending guidance now saw the truth. The galaxy's arbiters of justice were nothing more than frightened despots in robes. On the observation deck of the departing diplomatic vessel, Elias watched as the first repercussions unfolded. The Crystal Accords, the legal framework the justices had weaponized for millennia, were being invoked against them. The Vithuri collective publicly severed ties. The Nixandra, their many heads no longer nodding in sycophantic unison, demanded an audit of every evaluation the court had ever conducted. His comms chimed. A message from Adaptive, the youngest of the justices and the only one who hadn't voted for humanity's eradication. You played the game better than we did, but games have consequences. Elias smirked. Earth's leaders, of course, called it a miracle. The media spun it as humanity's greatest diplomatic victory. But Elias knew the truth. They hadn't won. They'd survived. The Galactic High Court wasn't gone, just wounded, and wounded predators were the most dangerous. Still, the cracks in their foundation spread. Provisional membership was granted to humanity, a token gesture meant to placate the outrage, but the real victory was in the whispers. In the back rooms of alien embassies, in the hushed debates of species long silenced, a question now lingered. If a primitive human could outmaneuver the High Court, what else had they been wrong about? 3 cycles later, Elias stood on the rain-slicked balcony of Earth's newly christened Galactic Embassy, watching the first mixed species delegation arrive. Among them was Kor. Their once radiant frills now dimmed, their posture deflated. You didn't just beat us, Kor said, their voice stripped of its old condescension. You made us obsolete. Elias sipped his whiskey, real Earth whiskey, not the synthesized swill the galaxy usually served. No, you did that yourselves. We just held up the mirror. Kor's tendrils coiled tight. What happens now? Now, Elias grinned, sharp as a knife. Now you learn to play by the rules you wrote. The Galactic High Court would never admit defeat. They reformed, reluctantly. Added new species to their ranks. Stripped the worst of the old justices of power. But the galaxy remembered. And humanity? They remembered too.